The Lord of Darkness, Pablo Escobar. The story of Pablo Emilio. Escobar Gaviria is not merely the chronicle of a drug trafficker, but the grim narrative of how one man born into relative humility in Rio Negro, Antioquia, managed to twist the will of an entire nation and redefine the concept of organized crime on a global scale. His life, a vortex of violence, incalculable wealth, and perverse populism, stretches from his origins as a cunning car thief and minor smuggler to becoming the world's most wanted and most feared man, the undisputed capo of the Medellín Cartel. To truly understand Escobar, one must immerse oneself in the Colombia of the 1970s and 1980s, a land ripe for smuggling and drug trafficking, where corruption was systemic and institutions were fragile. Escobar possessed a brutal street intelligence, an unbridled ambition, and an innate understanding of the power that comes with unchecked money. His method was simple and terrifying: Plata o Plomo, silver or lead. Under this mantra, he bribed, intimidated, or murdered anyone who stood in the way of his expanding cocaine empire. The sheer magnitude of his wealth soon defied imagination. It is estimated that at his peak, the Medellín Cartel moved billions of dollars annually, a fortune so vast it became unmanageable. The legend tells that thousands of dollars were spent simply on rubber bands to secure the stacks of bills. This wealth, however, was not only used for the personal consumption of ostentatious luxuries, such as the enormous Hacienda Nápoles, with its private zoo and airplane replicas. Escobar understood the power of cynical philanthropy. He built soccer fields, gave away homes in slums, and funded social projects in the poor neighborhoods of Medellín, especially in the comunas. He thus earned the nickname Robin Hood, a messianic figure for the dispossessed, who saw in him the only man capable of providing what the state denied them. This popular support became his most formidable shield, a human barrier of loyalty and silence that would protect him from authorities for years. Escobar's rise culminated in his foray into politics in the early 1980s, becoming a substitute representative in the Colombian Congress. His goal was to gain immunity and legitimacy, seeking to whitewash his image and ensure his impunity. However, this step exposed him to the public eye, and it was the courageous Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, who dared to publicly denounce the illicit source of his wealth to the country. The confrontation was the turning point. Escobar's expulsion from Congress not only wounded his pride, but pushed him headlong into total war against the Colombian state. The threat of extradition to the United States became Escobar's red line, the only punishment he truly feared. From that moment on, fear became Colombia's most valuable currency, and Escobar established himself as the absolute owner of that currency. His face, once smiling and paternalistic, transformed into the image of terror. His ascent was complete. The reign of horror was now beginning. The story of a man who defied a continent is just beginning. If the dark side of power and crime intrigues you, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this chronicle. Once Pablo Escobar felt betrayed and threatened by the state apparatus, his strategy evolved from mass bribery to boundless terrorism. The 1980s transformed into a bloody succession of selective assassinations and indiscriminate bombings, an asymmetrical war that sought to break the government through the sheer force of panic. The main objective of this campaign of terror was to halt the extradition of Colombians to the United States, a measure Escobar viewed as a professional and personal death sentence. For him, a grave in Colombia was better than a cell in America. Escobar's narco-terrorism was methodical and chilling. It began with the assassination of key figures who symbolized the state's resistance. The first and most resonant was that of the aforementioned Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, gunned down in Bogotá in 1984. This political murder not only silenced an opponent but sent an unequivocal message: no one was safe. He would be followed by judges, prosecutors, brave journalists, police officers, and, most tragically, presidential candidates. The list of prominent victims is a testament to his brutality. Guillermo Cano Isasa, the director of the newspaper El Espectador, and the brave police officers who formed the search block all paid the price of integrity with their lives. But Escobar's violence did not stop at high-profile targets. To exert unbearable pressure on public opinion and the government, the Medellín Cartel resorted to car bomb attacks. These acts, indiscriminate by nature, filled the streets of Bogotá and Medellín with smoke, rubble, and the blood of innocent people. The most notorious was the bombing of the Administrative Department of Security, DOS, building in Bogotá in 1989, an explosion intended to kill the DS director, which ended up claiming the lives of over 60 civilians and injuring hundreds. This pattern of indiscriminate violence demonstrated a cruelty that transcended the limits of traditional organized crime. Escobar was not only seeking to control the drug business, he was aiming to destabilize the nation to the point of paralysis. His war reached a climax of madness with the attempt to blow up an Avianca airplane mid-flight in 1989. Although the target was allegedly the presidential candidate Cesar Gaviria, who fortunately did not board the flight, the act killed 107 innocent people, including 2 American citizens. This act crossed a moral and political line, drawing international attention and outrage to unprecedented levels. The state's response under the pressure of war and the threat of collapse was the creation of elite groups like the Search Bloc, Bloc de Búsqueda, a special force dedicated exclusively to Escobar's capture or neutralization. The clashes turned into pitched battles, with Escobar's hitmen, often teenagers from the comunas, confronting the state's military power. The capo, meanwhile, hid in a network of caletas, hiding places, that spanned the entire metropolitan area of Medellín. Despite being cornered, Escobar's arrogance led him to negotiate his surrender on his own terms. The result was La Catedral, the luxury prison he built for himself, a monument to his power where he continued to operate his business, order assassinations, and receive visitors, all under the facade of confinement. This farce, however, would be his final condemnation, as the scandal forced the government to take extreme measures. The line between justice and madness blurs in the drug war. If you dare to follow the trail of explosions and dark pacts, subscribe now to continue with the final siege. The agreement for Pablo Escobar's surrender and his subsequent incarceration in La Catedral was, from the start, a humiliating concession by the Colombian state to the power of drug trafficking. In June 1991, Escobar turned himself in, but not to a common jail, but to a prison he himself designed and financed, located in the mountains of Envigado. La Catedral was less a penitentiary and more a fortified resort complex. It featured a jacuzzi, waterfalls, a bar, a gym, and even a telescope to observe his family in Medellín. Most critically, it was guarded by his own trusted men, with the Colombian army obligated to maintain a prudent distance. The deal guaranteed that Escobar would not be extradited, a monumental triumph for the capo. However, his confinement was a blatant farce. From La Catedral, Escobar continued to run the Medellín Cartel, organize shipments, and, most seriously, order assassinations. The final straw for the government and public opinion was the brutal murder of 2 of his lieutenants, Fernando Galeano and Gerardo Moncada, inside the very prison. Escobar had lured them there on a pretext, accusing them of theft, and then tortured and executed them. The ensuing scandal was unavoidable. The government was forced to act to reclaim its lost dignity. In July 1992, President Cesar Gaviria ordered Escobar's transfer to a legitimate military prison. The operation was chaotic. When the Vice Minister of Justice and the Director of the INPEC arrived at La Catedral to notify him of the transfer, they were taken hostage. What followed was a tense and dramatic early morning. As Army Special Forces surrounded the complex, Escobar, demonstrating once again his cunning and the weakness of the security forces, escaped through the back of the prison, sliding down a steep and densely forested hillside. His escape marked the beginning of the most intense and destructive manhunt in Colombia's modern history. Escobar's flight reignited the war, but this time the context was different. The government was more determined, and crucially, powerful new enemies rose against him. Escobar's disappearance from La Catedral not only unleashed the fury of the state, but galvanized his rivals. The Cali Cartel, historically his competition, took advantage of the Medellín Cartel's weakness. But the most lethal and mysterious enemy was a paramilitary group calling itself Los Pepes, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar. Composed of Escobar's victims, defectors from his own cartel, and financed by the Cali Cartel, Los Pepes initiated a total war of attrition against the capo and his structure. Their tactic was simple. They targeted Escobar's family, his lawyers, his accountants, and anyone who helped him, forcing him out of hiding or into surrender. They burned his properties and sowed terror among his associates, forcing him to live as a fugitive without a peaceful night's sleep. This last year of Escobar's life was a descent into desperation. Cornered by the search block, hunted by Los Pepes, and feeling the pressure of a family clamoring for safety, the boss watched his empire crumble day after day. The key men in his structure fell, either through capture or at the hands of Los Pepes. The man, who once had the world at his feet, found himself reduced to hiding in modest houses in Medellín, trembling at every noise. His power, forged in terror and money, dissolved into the anguish of a fugitive. The fall of the empire was not a single event, but a slow, agonizing process of asphyxiation. The noose tightens. Fortune and fear are no longer enough to protect the fugitive. If you want to witness the end of this reign of terror, subscribe and join us until the last breath of the boss. We have reached the end of this journey through the life of Pablo Escobar. His story, marked by blood and gold, is a reminder of the limits of power. Thank you for joining us in this intense narrative. If this chronicle of the Lord of Darkness has captivated you, please give this a like. Follow the channel for more in-depth stories on the mysteries of history and crime. And don't forget to subscribe to be the first to join our next explorations.